Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another critical conversation. A lot has been happening around the world, and we're going to, inshallah, dive into some of those topics. But as always, Assalamu alaikum, Nathir. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, James. Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. It's good to be back.
Alhamdulillah, barakallahu feek. So, subhanallah, this is today we want to talk about Sudan. Now, Sudan, subhanallah, it has been in the news recently, but it's something that's been going on for a long time. Our brothers and sisters in Sudan have been going through, let's say, hardship for a very, very long time. Hardship is obviously an understatement, but inshallah, we want to break it down quite thoroughly today, inshallah. And obviously, Mamdani's been in the news. And
Yes.
I just think it'll be interesting if we had a couple of words on that before going into more detail. And inshallah, with Sudan as well, we want to go into more detail in the future. SubhanAllah, have some guests on. But just for the meantime, inshallah, for us to break down the history of Sudan so that we know when we're ready for when our guest comes on and when we see things happening in the future, we know, okay, fine, what led to the situation in the first place in Sudan. SubhanAllah, Sudan. So Sudan is similar to many, many, many Arab states, Muslim states, in the sense that it was colonized and then the colonizers left, and in their place, a dictatorial leader came in place, very similar to those in Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, Gaddafi, very similar to these types of leaders, kind of thing. Entirely, the whole regime was there to serve him, and he was violent, but violent in a repressive way, not necessarily violent in a bloodthirsty way, not in the same way as we're seeing now. Omar al-Bashir, that's not to say that, subhanallah, anyone should accept status quo of the Dhillah, but subhanallah, just to give the history. So Omar al-Bashir was in power for a long time, and then Arab Spring rolled around. It was actually like quite late into the Arab Spring. Some of the latest events in the Arab Spring is, subhanallah, the Arab Spring rolled around and the Sudani people protested against Omar al-Bashir, right, and his leadership, and so, subhanallah, widespread protests across Sudan. Now, Sudan's a very interesting country. It's very similar to Saudi in the sense that it's a bunch of different tribes that aren't necessarily the most connected to each other, right? So when we look at Saudi Arabia, even though they look quite similar to us, they are actually, until very recently, and I think even still now, they still have this sense. There is a strong tribal sense of, okay, you are an individual within belonging to a wider tribe.
Like, the narrative, the nationalist kind of idea that we are a nation, we're a cohesive, imagined community with a shared identity. It doesn't really fit as smoothly for these places where the tribal structure is very strong, and
Subhanallah.
it's certainly part of the fabric of Saudi social organization.
Absolutely.
That's how people. It's a key
Absolutely.
part of the identity.
Subhanallah. Even what exactly as you're saying. I mean, even if we look at it Islamically, the ties of kinship are obviously important, right? Knowing your tribe is not wrong in any sense, but to have a set of rule, a set of governance based upon your tribe is generally wrong. And so it's or giving preference to one tribe over another is objectively wrong. So subhanallah, yani, that's just to lay the groundwork. Both are not explicitly Islamic frameworks, whereas, tribalism, okay, this is gonna, I want to break this down a little bit. It makes more sense than nationalism. Why does it make more sense? Because they're actually family, right? They're actually all descended from so and so.
There's something, it's tangible in
Yeah, subhanallah, because family, I mean, is an objective measure of closeness. That's not only in a lot of societies. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. That's not to say that it is the objective, as in like it is the absolute measure of closeness. Your relationship with Allah is the most important attribute to you, and that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his best friend was Abu Bakr. His best friend wasn't, a member of the Hashim tribe. And it's just people still live in that sort of with that sort of understanding that, hey, I belong to a tribe. Again, it's not necessarily wrong, but it makes more sense than an arbitrary set of lines that were randomly drawn on a map, and now they say, hey, you guys should all belong to one group, kind of thing. England or the United Kingdom, right, makes sense. Why? Because it's a distinct set of islands with their own language, their own culture, their own history that generally intermarried, right? If you want to say the Arab Peninsula, then that would actually make more sense as a country, as an entity, right? But that's if you include Yemen, which is obviously its own distinct region, right? But that whole area shares a culture, an identity, obviously a language, right, with differences in dialect. Sudan, in that sense, is even less. There's even less cohesion in Sudan. That's not to say there's a lack of cohesion amongst the people, but that's just to say that ethnically and culturally, there's even less cohesion than in Saudi Arabia, right? Which the Saudi people have found a way to get along, whether that be, subhanAllah, under a dictatorial regime or not. But, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, the Sudani people, obviously, and for those who know Sudani people, they're very, I don't know, like, amongst all people you find good and bad, but generally they're a very easygoing, they're a very lovely, populace. And of course, you will always find bad amongst them. But just so that being said, but Sudan is very diverse, right? Even amongst its Arab tribes, right? There's huge differences between, their identity, their cultural identity, and then they have a lot of non-Arab tribes as well. And those tribes stretch all over Africa, and some are found in Yemen, from my understanding, and some are found in Libya, and plenty are found in Chad. So those tribes themselves have far closer ties to each other than they would just to the nation state of Sudan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Anyway, subhanAllah. So what ties the Sudani people together is a sense of Islam, right? And alhamdulillah, the Sudani people are generally very, they're quite a religious people, right? Obviously, we're just working on averages here. It doesn't matter at all where someone's from. And subhanAllah, that's not a statement of someone's heart. But just as a general populace, they're quite a religious people, right? They care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not a violent people. Why has their region been war torn for, we're looking at 6 years now? So what happens is that they had a dictator, like we said at the beginning, called Omar al-Bashir. Now, what does Omar do? Omar is in power. He abuses his power. Then protests happen against Omar al-Bashir. Protests happen, and subhanAllah, there's sorry, I forgot to mention this. So that lack of cohesion means that in the Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, in the west of Sudan, there's a place called Darfur and the surrounding regions of Darfur, right, in Sudan. That region is being treated worse by the government because of, basically the government is made up of, or the leader in the government is from a tribe, and this is from my understanding, subhanAllah, and that tribe treats other tribes worse than he treats his own tribe, and subhanAllah. And so that the people from the West, right, come out and protest. And that, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, I forget the exact dates, but we're looking at it's kind of mid 2000s, 2006, 2008, around that, subhanAllah. In that environment, Omar al-Bashir is still the leader at that stage, right? And what he does is, instead of sending the army to quell any sort of rebellion, he funds a militia that already exists in that group, and that militia is called the RSF, right? And that militia does, unspeakable acts of genocide against the people, right? And massacres take place, and mass rape takes place, and astaghfirullah, it's the most disgusting acts take place. And the reason why this is so painful as well is because, when it comes to Palestine, there's a clear khalas, there's a batil and there's truth, there's falsehood and there's truth, right? When it comes to Sudan, there is a clear good, right, and wrong, right? But both sides claim Islam, right? The reality is that this is really, really hurtful to say, right? is that both sides claim Islam, but obviously we have one side that is, yeah, they're not even Khariji in their tendency. From my understanding, and Allah knows best, I haven't seen particularly Khariji tendencies from them. It's not that they have some sort of militant, hyper, you know, a hyper zealot version of Islam that they're adhering to, and that's why they're committing what they're committing. No, it's actually that they're just bloodthirsty, and they're just a set of violent sociopaths that want to kill as many people as they can, and that's my understanding of the situation. SubhanAllah, we're actually going to touch on this afterwards. Sudan doesn't get covered like a lot of other conflicts get covered, and I think there's a variety of reasons for this. But SubhanAllah, that's why it makes researching this slightly more obscure than researching Palestine. And so it's largely actually in the West, right? In Darfur, Sunni non-Arab Muslims, right? So Sudan, most people know Sudan is an Arab country, right? And it speaks Arabic, but there are tribes there who ethnically aren't Arab. Now, most of them will still speak Arabic anyway. And according to the scholars, this considers you an Arab, but it allows for it's that same sort of jahiliyyah that we saw at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where someone, I'm more Arab than you, or I'm of a higher tribe than you, or of a higher lineage, so it's my tribe will undermine your tribe. So it's that exact same sort of ignorant tendency that existed with the Arabs before. And so what happened is that, like we said, disgusting massacres took place. Thousands of people were killed. Mass rape. Astaghfirullah. May Allah give victory to our brothers and sisters there. Wallah, it's disgusting to see, and we know obviously Allah's promise is true. They will receive justice, and those that perpetrated the crimes against them obviously will receive the most severe punishment. But subhanAllah, it's just important to know what's leading up to the situation. And so there's a sense of firstly anger and distrust against the Bashir government, but that had been building for some time. Also, this rapid support forces that we saw just kind of legitimized by the Bashir government. They were initially just a militia, and they are really just a militia, but they were given army funding by the government to basically act as say guns for hire, right? In that region, right? So they were an informal army, but the problem is when you give bandits legitimacy, they always misuse that. And then subhanAllah, so they're given legitimacy. Then what happens is that the Emirati regime uses them to fight their war against the Houthis. Right now, they just wanted to do an insurrection. This is again its own discussion within itself, but it just introduces UAE as a player in this game. Now, subhanAllah, that's kind of the background. Omar al-Bashir, right, has his own. He is the leader, right? He is the government, and he's a government just as the Gaddafi regime and Hosni Mubarak and all of these people in the Muslim world at the time. A bit like a Bashar al-Assad kind of thing. Similar to that sort of thing. He was a leader like them. And then what happens is that the people rise up against him. There's mass protests, and under Omar al-Bashir, right, you have the actual leader of the army, and that's a guy by the name of Burhan, right? And Burhan, he is the leader of what is now called the SAF, the Sudan Armed Forces, and that's actually Sudan's military. Okay. Right. Now, they're not innocent either. They've had a hand under Omar al-Bashir in perpetrating war crimes against their own population. Again, it's similar to the way that I would describe the RSF, except, and Allah knows best, the RSF seems more bloodthirsty than the SAF. And it seems that the country under the SAF would be a lot better than it would be under the RSF. But both of them have perpetrated war crimes. Both of them have done things that are really beyond words in how disgusting they are, subhanAllah. But it's important to understand this. So you have the Burhan's forces, which is the SAF, right? The Sudani Armed Forces. And then we mentioned the RSF. The RSF is a militia. It's basically a set of bandits. They were actually set up to protect, and they actually, I mean, probably it was this, but they were set up as like armed guards for trading caravans that would go back and forth between Sudan. And they just became stronger and stronger, and then subhanallah, yani, more and more funding, and now they're their own kind of militia, they're their own army, and they run things, and subhanallah. So RSF, their leader is a guy by the name of Hemeti, right? So you have Hemeti on one side, which is the leader of the RSF, and Burhan on one side, which is the leader of the Sudani armed forces. What happens is there's a protest against the actual leader, Omar al-Bashir. Now, they both worked for Omar al-Bashir. Both the RSF and the SAF have worked for Omar al-Bashir to establish his regime. But then there's protest against him. There's protests in Sudan against him, mass protests against him. And they wanted the government to fall. And because, subhanAllah, yani, it's the legacy of persecution and oppression. So it was just similar to yani, like the French protests against the kings and the likes, right? Obviously less bloody. What happens is, subhanAllah, is both sides take advantage of this. And there's a coup d'etat. There's a coup against Omar al-Bashir, and he was overthrown by the Saudi armed forces. But so the SAF actually ran the coup, and the SAF took over, and with Burhan as the leader. And he promised that this was going to be a temporary situation, that they were going to hand over a transitionary government. They were going to hand over the leadership to an actual government, and there would be less military intervention. What happens is, subhanAllah, Burhan had a plan. He said 1 year. He said, one report he said 1 year. I think another report he said 2 years. But subhanallah, I need to get the exact numbers on this. But then Hemeti, who was actually taken in as like the second in command under Burhan, right? So Hemeti, the leader of the RSF, which is its own militia, is taken in under Burhan as the second in command, right? But he's a power-hungry guy. And so he says, firstly, we don't want it to be 1 year. We want it to be 10 years. We want this transitionary government to be 10 years. And we want our leaders, myself included, obviously, right, him talking about himself, to take very high positions in the government and the military of this future government. And so Burhan says no. And there's, a bit of back and forth until what happens is that on April the 15th, 2023, there's a power struggle between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces themselves.
Right.
And that's basically when war breaks out, right? That's the beginning of the war. It's about 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago. And since the war's broken out, we have seen, subhanallah, it is just genuinely, how do I say this, unspeakable acts of violence, and like we said, mass rape and genocide. And subhanallah, there was a video going around quite early in the conflict, or quite early in the war, which is where a bunch of women, Muslim Sunni women, committed suicide en masse because they knew that if the RSF, because the RSF was about to come in, I'm pretty sure. I'm high, like it was definitely one of them, but I'm highly suspicious it was the RSF, because they knew that if the RSF come in, then they would rape them, right? So they committed suicide so that they wouldn't be raped. It's that bad, subhanallah. And it just there was a bit of back and forth, right? There was a bit where the RSF overtook all of Khartoum, which is the capital of Sudan, and they pushed the SAF to the coast, right? Now, this is actually interesting, subhanAllah. They pushed the SAF to the coast, the Saudi armed forces. That's Burhan's forces. They pushed him to the coast, the eastern coast. And RSF, which is Hemeti's forces, had the west and actually had a big chunk of it, right? Recently, the SAF and Burhan took over. I wish I had a map, actually. If you can pull up a map of Sudan. Yeah, just a map of Sudan, right? Let me see if I can pull one up, actually.
You might find a better one. I've got one here. Let's try this.
Oh, okay, here we go. This is probably quite good.
Got a better one.
This is probably quite good. Subhanallah. This is interesting, wallahi. Yes. Okay, let me stream this, subhanallah. And so this is a good illustration of what exactly was going on in Sudan.
Right.
So there's a lot of fighting in Khartoum itself between the Sudanese army, the SAF, right, and the Rapid Support Forces, which is the RSF. And you see these are the dots that represent the yellow. There's a lot of yellow around here in the east. The red is in the west. The red is more around here in the east. And so the RSF controls kind of this region, right? And the SAF, the Sudanese armed forces controlled the coast, and they controlled Khartoum, and they were pushed out of Khartoum, and then they recaptured it, subhanallah. And so, yeah, this kind of just shows the number of attacks. In each one of these attacks, subhanallah, how many people are dying. It's important to mention this, and we're going to get onto that, inshallah. But what we're seeing is that it's a little bit similar to Palestine in the sense that there aren't confirmed numbers, right? But a reasonable, very conservative estimate. So we're looking at basically the minimum is about 400,000, right? SubhanAllah, it's an insane number. It's an insane number when you think about it, right? These are 400,000 people, innocent people just killed. And subhanallah, and then other estimates say 610,000, and Darfur has seen a lot of genocide take place. So we're talking about the western side, and it's largely a non-Arab side as well, non-Arab African Muslims that are there just subhanallah undergoing a lot of persecution.
Sure.
And so
I mean, you said that the UAE was involved in this because of their own their own interests, but is that the main reason that it's for them, it's a kind of proxy thing for their other, what was it, for against the Houthis? This is against in Yemen, right? So
yeah, so subhanallah, the UAE, I mean, so that's just kind of sets a backstage for their involvement, for their interaction with the RSF and the SAF. So what we said, yes, the SAF, there was a bit of back and forth between them, right? But actually, it's important to note before we continue is that this war that's taking place, it's actually a war between two stubborn men, right? And you have a whole civilian population caught in the middle. You have basically Burhan and the SAF, which, like we said, they're not a faultless group, right? And they're not a group given plenty of love by the Sudani people in general, from my understanding, right? But what it is he was unwilling to compromise on his own power, right, Burhan? And Hamati was unwilling to compromise on his own power. And so what happened is that they went to war with Sudan as a battleground, entirely uncaring for the people that were going to be killed in this, right? And subhanallah, that's why we're seeing so many people being killed. The size of there is an estimate that the RSF is 40,000 people, right? But we're seeing 400,000 people being killed and 610,000 people being killed, and it's because there's a sort of violent militias, right, fighting against each other, and there's just a people caught in the middle of that. And subhanallah, and Hamati and the RSF have committed war crimes, but obviously Omar al-Bashir and the SAF have also indiscriminately bombed civilian sites, and they've killed a lot of people as well. So subhanallah, yani, it's not a perfect situation here.
Yeah, it's one of these. It's like we can rarely say that things are black and white.
Yeah, subhanallah. Actually, so even though objectively you are correct, right? Subhanallah, every story has two sides to it, right? In my own 2 cents on things is that in most conflicts in the Muslim world today is pretty black and white. Palestine being an example, China being an example, Myanmar being an example, يعني, subhanallah, Yemen being an example. It's pretty black and white.
So maybe this is a hot take here, but I would say you could categorize even the Palestine-Israel conflict as black and white. We've talked as not black and white. We've talked in the past about these gangs and militias.
Subhanallah,
Right?
subhanallah.
Palestinians,
Subhanallah.
Palestinians who are selling out their
Subhanallah.
own people, or even the PLA.
Mm.
Also,
Yeah, but
I mean, I
on the
suppose
one side,
you categorize it.
yeah, subhanallah, I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying,
Right.
right? That it depends on exactly how you categorize it. But forget about people calling themselves Muslim. Let's look at the actual Muslim people there, right?
Sure.
Not the kind of munafiqeen that are acting as militias for Israel kind of thing. Even Sudan is it's pretty black and white. Both parties should be entirely deposed, and an actual leadership of the people should come into power,
Sure.
right?
I think this is the point, right? Is that when we we see from the Islamic perspective, we see that there is a fundamental issue, is that we have a bunch of Muslims fighting each other,
Yeah,
killing each other, committing crimes against each other. That this is the severe problem. When it comes to apportioning this side and that side, ultimately it's about haqq and the batil. That's
subhanallah.
the distinction, and that's the clear-cut distinction. And to the extent that people are upon the haqq is to the extent that we as Muslims are allying ourselves to them, and that we see then Muslims, or that's what should be happening, but what we see is Muslims killing Muslims. This kind of supposed Muslim states fighting against other supposed Muslim states for their own national interest, because that infection, that poison of the national identity that is beyond the has gone beyond the identity of the Ummah in all of these places, so that national interest overtakes Ummah interest, and we see this kind of stuff. That people have bought into this idea of their state, and we're this, and we have our interests, and I'm going to go and fight other Muslims, because what? Because the reason of national interest.
Absolutely, subhanallah. But from my understanding, and obviously, subhanallah, yani, there's actually, by the way, absolutely what you're saying is correct, James. But it doesn't seem like, and from my understanding, that sort of mindset hasn't seeped into the actual local populace, right? Sudan has a population of 50 million. The RSF is 40,000. The SAF, I don't know its exact size, but subhanallah, it's not, it can't be that big, right? Even though it's meant to be quite a bit bigger than the RSF, right? It really seems that you just have a bunch of power-hungry, bloodthirsty people that are using Sudan as their battleground, and then there's just the people caught in the middle of this.
I see your point. So, as opposed to what I was saying, which is that you can kind of go, it's national identities against each other. It's more so, as you say, people who are power hungry,
absolutely,
have their own personal interests, and if anything, they will disguise them as national interests, but maybe not. Maybe it's like a thin layer at the top of these kind of elites fighting each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's more of a traditional power struggle, yani, and that sounds bad to say, but it's more of like a kind of, it's just what has been seen time and time again in history of two leaders just going to war because they wanted more power, right? And a region caught in the middle of this. Now, the problem with why this is so bad, especially in Sudan, is because both sides, they claim to be Muslim, right? And yet they're killing each other, and yet they're committing, what's it called? Unspeakable violence against the civilian population. Wallahi, it's very disgusting to see.
No, some of the videos are frankly
yeah, go for it. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, some of the videos that I've been seeing, kinds of things, just the cruelty, the humiliating way that people are being treated, the violence, and the just the degradation that people being subjected to.
And so I think that's an underlying thing that we should never forget when talking about this. We talk about the RSF and we talk about the SAF, right? In a sense, the Palestinian people and Hamas are quite well intertwined, right? In the sense that the people of Gaza actually support resistance against apartheid and oppression, right? And the ethnic cleansing of their land, right? This is just a war that's been imposed on the people, right? And so it's different in that sense. It's different from what's it called, and because the sides claim to be Muslim, people will get confused and think, oh, this is just two brothers arguing, or this is like, just violence that's in our area. But no, it's two very opportunists, and it shows that they're opportunists because they worked for Omar al-Bashir, and yet when the people protested against Omar al-Bashir, both of them jumped in and did a coup d'etat against the leader. So they're just opportunist, power-hungry leaders that are willing to sacrifice, that are willing to spill,
whatever they need.
Yeah, exactly.
They
spill unspeakable blood, right, just to keep them in power. Subhanallah.
Whatever they need
to keep themselves in power. And so may Allah get rid of them and replace them, inshallah, with a just leadership. But I just wanted to show also this, it gives a breakdown of the sort of numbers that we're seeing of deaths. And these are, by the way, when we say numbers, most of these, whenever you see kind of a conflict reported on, humanitarian agencies generally will give you an underestimate in order to be safe and conservative, generally, right? Now you have to look at what side those humanitarian agencies support, kind of thing, right? If they claim to be neutral, then that's one thing. If the humanitarian, and this is why it's so interesting that in Gaza, almost all of the humanitarian agencies that report on Gaza are Western based, right? And all of the West has historical alliances with Israel. Why? Because it founded Israel. That's why it's so telling when Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and Beit Selam, which is an Israeli human rights organization, subhanAllah. I mean, it is a human rights organization, but I'm pretty sure it's based out of Israel. And that's why it's so telling. It's like when Allah Ta'ala says, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا, that their own family, right, is bearing witness against them, subhanAllah. So that's why it's so telling. But subhanAllah, let's look at this because it breaks down some of the numbers involved. Here we go. Bismillah.
Each of these dots represents one attack.
Or is it quite low? Let me put this
up. Each of these dots represents one attack. In 2 years of civil war, people in Sudan have lived through more than 11,000 of them. An average of 16 attacks every single day. Half have been carried out by Sudan's army and 38% by the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary group. Other armed groups are responsible for the rest. Khartoum, the capital, has been at the epicenter of the war, but the fighting has also spread across the country. More than 30,000 people have been killed. The real number is likely much higher. Sudan's war is a humanitarian disaster. In 2 years of conflict, Sudan has set a devastating record. 30 million people need humanitarian aid. That's 3 out of every 5 people in the country. It's also the world's largest displacement crisis. Millions have had to leave their homes because of the fighting. Most are still in Sudan. Hunger is spiraling out of control. More than 600,000 people currently live in famine, and another 8 million are one step away. In a country with a broken healthcare system, cholera and other diseases are rampant. Women and children have been hit particularly hard. Rape and sexual violence are widespread. What's been documented is believed to only be a fraction of what's happening. More than 3 million children have nothing to eat, and 17 million are out of school. That's a whole generation at risk of being lost.
Subhanallah. And then I just, so that's important to see. And I also wanted to show quickly, and this is what has been on the news recently, is that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is that subhanallah.
This drone footage from Al Fasher shows a city scarred by war. Buildings lie in ruins, streets are empty, and people appear to be fleeing the city. It also shows bodies lying scattered on the ground as fighters from the Rapid Support Forces celebrate. Witnesses say the paramilitary RSF swept through the area, attacking civilians and looting homes. One woman from Al Fasher describes how her neighbors were killed and families torn apart.
They killed the men, they killed them all, and they left none behind. We don't know what to do. We're exhausted and we suffer greatly. The children are hungry, and we are also hungry and thirsty and in need of food.
Further south in South Kordofan, more death. The bodies of a family of 7, including children, were recovered after a drone strike reportedly carried out by the RSF hit a camp for displaced people in Al Abbasiyah, Tagali. Local sources say there were no survivors. Across Sudan, hundreds of families are on the move, fleeing violence in Al Fasher and surrounding towns. Many have arrived in the north, hungry, dehydrated, and traumatized. Aid agencies warn the crisis is worsening fast. Health services have collapsed, and entire communities are being forced to flee repeatedly. The UN has condemned attacks on civilians, but with much of Darfur cut off from aid and communications, the actual scale of the atrocities is unknown. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera.
So subhanallah, and that's an important point to bring up, is that the actual number is unknown here, because subhanallah, but we're seeing estimates of 400,000 people, like I said, minimum killed, and that's not taking into account the amount of death from disease and famine that has been taking place because of this war. So subhanallah, very difficult to see. Now, on a far more malicious side, I mean, okay, obviously the what's it called, both of the leadership of these armies that have been fighting against each other, or these militias that have been fighting against each other, right? Definitely malicious, but on a it's very shaitani, right? Is the UAE's complicity in this,
Right.
So I mentioned briefly that Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. I mentioned briefly that the UAE used the RSF to fight against the Houthis in Yemen for a period of time. Subhanallah. Then it comes out that basically at the beginning of this war between the RSF and the SAF, it seemed dead obvious that the SAF would destroy the RSF, right? Because of its funding, it's a legitimate military, right? I mean, like, it actually existed as an army, right? So they actually had aerial attack capabilities, right? They had drones, and they had Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. I don't know the exact specifics, but they were able to attack from the air, right? The RSF had none of that, and so it seemed that that the SAF should definitely win, and this is what people expected was that when the war broke out in 2023, that it would be kind of like an enemy, or a very, very, very bloody set of a short time event, and then khalas, it would end. What we've seen is that it's been very, very bloody, but it hasn't ended. And then someone would say, okay, so how comes the RSF didn't go down? And that's actually where, subhanAllah, it leads into this whole rabbit hole. And rabbit hole makes it seem like a conspiracy theory. No, it's all actually proven, right? Is that basically the RSF, which, like we said, is this militia that is in the west of Sudan, right? They're funded by the United Arab Emirates, right? And so they've been given Chinese drones and Chinese attack subhanallah, Chinese weapons from the UAE itself, and they've been funded by it. Now, that's what's enabled them to continue with this war for so long, the RSF, right? And actually, the SAF didn't have a lot of funding, and they were receiving funding from, or they were allied. Allied is probably a strong word, but they had relationships with Egypt, right? And then what happened is that Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the Emirates, wanted to do a deal with Sisi, right, the head of Egypt, and then subhanallah, the relationship between Egypt and and Sudan kind of disappeared in that, showing that obviously the head of Egypt knows that, okay, if you want to be in the Emirates' good books, don't support the Sudani armed forces, the SAF. And so they've been funding the RSF, and therefore they've been funding the actual war, and they've been funding the genocide. And there's a lot of cases of mass killings and mass rapes that's been taking place at the hand of the RSF and its fighters. And so you think, subhanallah, what excuse does the UAE firstly have to get involved? Secondly, what's their interest in the region? Why do they care about Sudan? Right? And actually, it seems to go against their previous policy, because they'd invested a lot into Sudan. They'd invested a lot. Why? Knowing that Sudan, what's it called? Its eastern coast is along the Gulf Strait. And so protecting that trade line is very important to not only the Gulf states, but actually the rest of the world, right? That was where the Houthis were able to put actual pressure on Israel, right? They were able to cause billions of dollars in losses, because they targeted any ships associated with Israel that passed through that strait. And that's actually why America was bombing them last year under the Biden administration. So, that is a strait of tremendous importance, and it's one that actually has a lot of how do I say this? It holds a lot of consequences for the region at large. Okay, so if you control that strait, then you have a lot of leverage over any power in the world at this stage, and because so many shipping routes go through that strait, right? Go through the Horn, past the Horn of Africa, through that strait, and then through the Suez Canal. And so, subhanallah, and actually the UAE had invested in the Bashir, or Allah Alam if it was a Bashir government, but they invested, I'm pretty sure, into the SAF government, right? In order to have these kind of ports built along the Sudani coast and to have a presence there. So why would they now support the RSF? So there's a couple of reasons, right? A very obvious one, and this is one that's been reported on, is that so much gold gets smuggled under the table into the UAE from Sudan. West Sudan is rich in gold. And this is actually something that was new to me, subhanAllah. West Sudan is rich in gold, and the UAE is placing itself at the center of this new gold rush. A lot of countries, and this is actually something I'm happy to see, are moving away from the American dollar, right? And the American dollar is based on its strength and its clout and the price of oil and all these sorts of things, right? They're moving away from the American dollar, and so what do they put their trust on? Is gold, and that's objectively a good,
that is a
very good basis of a currency, right? That's the historical basis of a currency. Actually having a currency based on something that's as flaccid, right? That is, not having basically money not represent something of objective value, right, is very dangerous. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, but some scholars consider it haram. I think all scholars consider it haram, but I don't want to comment exactly, so take that with a big pinch of salt. But subhanallah. And so a lot of governments are moving towards having, that's becoming a far more viable option, right? Either way, it was always a viable option, but it's just that it's becoming more tempting now because of countries wanting to move away from the dollar, specifically countries like Russia and China that don't want the American dollar is a way that America and the US imposes its foreign influence on different countries. Subhanallah. And so when you move away from that, you take away that control from the American government. They're actually very terrified of this, right? Some people say that Gaddafi was killed, or the reason why America was so critical of Gaddafi, and he was a very bad man, right? No doubt about it. But one of the reasons why America was so critical of him is because he actually wanted to set up a united African currency, right? Which, even though he was a bad man, was a good idea. And so there's been this move towards gold, right? And there's been a booming gold market. And in that booming gold market, the UAE has put itself at the center of that, right? And they've put itself they want to be at the center of all this gold trade. And so they have super. I don't think they tax at all any gold that's bought in their country. So subhanallah, people can go there, buy gold, ship it over, kind of thing. So with no tariffs. And obviously the UAE benefits from this, but they don't have any gold mines. They don't have any substantial gold mines. I don't even know if they have any, right? And so where are they getting all this gold from? Actually, what happens is that it's kind of, we say smuggled, right? It is smuggled, right? But what I like, it's definitely under the table. But why is it done like that? Is because, or why is the words smuggled not the best word? Is because the RSF is basically giving it to them.
Right.
Now they are paying for it, but obviously heavily discounted prices. Not a single, no tariffs are being imposed on it at all. They say that basically, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Right? You can imagine a poor country like Sudan. I'm actually interested in what is the GDP of Sudan? Right? Okay, 49 billion. Right? Of that, in 1 year, right? In 1 year, so in 1 year, about something like 100 tons of gold, right? 100 tons of gold was transported. That's what is known, right? 100 tons of gold was transported from Sudan to the UAE, right? Equating about 4.5 billion, 4.6 billion, which is about 10% of their GDP. So in 1 year, they exported 10% of their GDP, right? But this is all done under the table. So who's seeing the benefits of this, right? It's only really the RSF. And so that's actually a big reason why the UAE wants to fund Sudan's war. That's what it seems to be. It seems to be one of the big reasons is that the UAE is funding Sudan's war because it gives them access to these gold mines and gold at a significantly cheaper price. And bearing in mind their aim to want to be one of the gold leaders in the world, or one of the leading kind of gold markets in the world, right? So that's one reason. The actual leader of, I'm pretty sure it's Mohammed bin Zayed, which is the leader of the UAE, right? He said, he mentioned, when asked about why he's supporting the RSF, he mentioned that, I'm paying back the debt that we have for the RSF supporting us against, or fighting on our behalf against the Houthis, which it is, look, they did do that, but it's nonsense. That's not why he's doing it at all. Yeah, it's not out of some sense of loyalty. It's that's just an excuse, right? And he wants to give what seems to be a slightly more noble excuse than, hey, we're doing it for the sake of gold. Also, subhanallah, this is what was mentioned by a political analyst, Sami Hamdi. Actually, we're talking about almost a year ago now, maybe a couple of months ago, right? Is that the UAE sees itself as even though it's tiny, they want to be an empiric power. They want to have almost like an empire, right? And so they're expanding their influence. And one of the ways they expand their influence is by funding militias that owe them loyalty, right? If they conquer the region, and also, just divide and conquer, right? Now, divide and conquer is a strategy that we saw, obviously during the colonial rule of most of the world, right? They split up most of our countries, and they, subhanallah, they pitted these people against each other. And so that's what's been happening in Sudan. I mean, all of us know the war in Sudan from about, 15, 20 years ago, where it was split up into North and South Sudan, and now, Sudan and South Sudan. And now there's talk about it possibly being split up into East Sudan and West Sudan, right? And so, subhanallah, they say that the UAE basically wants to position itself as a player that has a lot of clout in those regions. And if it's the source of funding for, let's say, the army of a region, then obviously that army will owe allegiance to its source of funding, right? Otherwise, it will just be cut off. So, subhanallah, it kind of sees itself as strengthening itself in the region. They claim that that the SAF is some sort of Islamist kind of regime, that they're associated with the Islamic Brotherhood, and that's there'll be what's it called, bad leadership in the area,
justifying on a kind of war on terror kind of line of reasoning.
Yeah, subhanallah. I mean, firstly, this is problematic from so many fronts. Firstly, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt was objectively a good force, far better than any sort of leadership we have now in the Arab world, right? But so yeah, they're arguing from a Western perspective anyway.
Right, exactly.
Right?
I mean, the word Islamist itself is a kind
Yeah.
of Orientalist cook-up. It's something that it's a frame of sorry, it's a category. It's a conceptual category done to scare Muslims away from considering political questions through an Islamic lens.
Subhanallah,
Because
exactly.
Islamist in people's minds means, suicidal terrorist, or someone who's kind of a crazy, go and blow some stuff up, and no one wants to be associated with that. Particularly if you're in the West, you don't want to be ostracized in that way. If you're a public figure, or if you're just a layperson in your local community, you don't want to be ostracized like that. And so they invent this term that has these connotations in our minds when we think of it. And so whenever a Muslim goes near politics and gets the title smack Islamist, they're suddenly, it's like a scarecrow. Right?
Absolutely.
It's like here's politics through the Islamic lens, because of course Allah has given us guidance for every realm, right? But here's the scarecrow, Islamist.
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
we don't go near it, we get afraid because we don't want to be labeled in that way. So this whole reason, this whole thing of the whole way of considering other Muslims in this way, it
shows that ideologically,
non-Islamic framing.
Subhanallah, it shows that ideologically they're aligned to who they're aligned to, kind of a Western paradigm way of thinking. It was reported that bin Zayed said to, I think the American ambassador, he said in a meeting to, subhanallah, Sami Hamdi brings this up quite often. And we mentioned Sami Hamdi last episode, right? But he mentions that bin Zayed said, look, and basically he's saying this to scare the West away from allowing democracy in the region. He said, look, if you allow my people to vote, or if you allow these people to vote for a leader, they will vote for a 1,400-year-old book, as if it's some sort of like humiliation for us to vote for a 1,400-year-old book. Actually, we're voting for the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth, right? But it shows, I mean, it's not even, that's not even nifaq at that stage. That's just kufr, right? But subhanallah, and so this is actually what Sami Hamdi was saying many months ago. He said that the UAE is terrified, right, of the Sudanese people themselves voting in a government, because time and time again they've shown that they will vote in an Islamic-leaning government, right? So subhanallah, that's not to say necessarily an Ikhwani government, but an Islamic government, right? And so, and then it's not going to be a khilafah, right? Allah knows, but it's not going to be a khilafah necessarily, but it's going to be and so they're scared to have a united Sudan under an Islamic government. I mean, bearing in mind, it's Sudan is in a position where it doesn't have natural, or it actually has natural resources, it has gold and stuff like that, but it's in a position where it could, geographically, it could hold a lot of influence, right? But it's basically been forced to stay poor and war-torn, right, in the past 5 years, 6 years, by different forces, the UAE being one of them. And so it seems to be almost, they see that the Sudanese people don't align with their idea of what, where they want the UAE to be, right? Similarly to a Saudi sort of vision, but Saudi is obviously, Saudi actually supports the SAF. They support the Sudani armed forces, right?
Again, the whole cook-up of this whole thing of Muslim proxy Muslim fighting Muslim. It's like,
subhanallah. Absolutely. And that's actually, sorry, I don't know why, I meant to bring that up a long time ago, is that this is a proxy war, right? Okay, yeah, sorry, this has a lot to do with the UAE. So the UAE is fighting a proxy war, right? Obviously in Sudan, and who's paying the price? It's the Sudanese people themselves, right? And then just as a final point is that, a lot of people will ask, okay, but how comes I haven't heard of this? How comes this hasn't been broken down? There's a couple of reasons, right? Some will say that it's because they're African and there's a racism to this. And Allah knows best. My personal opinion, right, is that this might play a factor, but it doesn't play a big factor. Why I don't think it plays a big factor is that we saw a lot of emphasis put on, okay, so some will claim that it's racism because they're black, right? Because they're African and dark-skinned people are seen as lesser. And that could hold merit. But I personally am not of this opinion, right? Now, like this, obviously, I'm not of the opinion that black people are inferior, but I'm not of the opinion that that's why it's not,
talked about,
yeah, I'm not of the opinion that that's why it's not reported on, right? That might have a small impact, and Allah knows best, right? Some people say that they're not Arab, and so the Muslims and Arabs care less about the non-Arabs. Well, actually, subhanallah, most Arabs consider Sudanis to be Arab anyway, right? So there's that. But then they say, oh, we're darker Arab. It's a kind of a mixture of both types of racism, right? And then we have a lot of African ethnics in the area, and so it's a kind of mixture of that sort of racism. Allah knows best. That seems quite unlikely to me, and why that is because, okay, fine. Well, how comes China, right, and the Uyghur Muslims, and it's dirty to compare kind of genocides, but how comes the Uyghur Muslims?
Again, this is the kind of way in which our minds have been. Instead of thinking it's these are Muslims.
Subhanallah, subhanallah. Yeah. But I absolutely, and like I said, Yani, it feels wrong, but I'm just trying to use this as an example to say that, okay, why it's unlikely that this is racism is because the Uyghur Muslims got a lot of attention, right? Not as much as they deserve, definitely not. I mean, even the people of Gaza never got this the attention they deserved, let alone the Uyghur Muslims and the Sudani Muslims and the Yemeni. But they're not Arab. The Yemenis got a lot of attention, and a lot of them are quite dark, right? What's it called? The Indian Muslims get, they are reported on, right? Even though obviously not as much as other Muslims, but at the same time, from my understanding, the scale of murder that we're seeing in India, while atrocious, doesn't compare to the scale of murder that we're seeing in in Sudan. Whereas in India there is a clear black and white. Subhanallah. So I think that there's a couple of factors playing a role here. Firstly, Sudan's conflict is actually more recent. Palestine has been going on since the British Mandate of Palestine. So we're talking about 1915, yani. So it is a kind of a Allahumma salli, the word just left my mind, but it is a situation that is well ingrained within the Muslim consciousness, right? For generations, people have been telling their kids, make dua for Palestine. For generations, people have been telling their kids, inshallah, we'll see the victory in Palestine, right? Palestine obviously has religious significance, yani, that goes without saying. Yani. Sure. The Jerusalem and the Masjid al-Aqsa, right, holds religious significance. Okay, a lot of these conflicts are more black and white, right? Syria was more black and white. China was more black and white. Even obviously China and India are more black and white, right? We have basically a kafir government oppressing and killing a Muslim population, right? But even in Syria, it was basically that. When you saw the Bashar regime being very, very brutal against its own people, and the Bashar regime was of an extremely deviant sect of Islam that everyone considers kafir. So apart from their own, they're the only ones that don't consider themselves kuffar, right? So subhanallah, so it's very clear there. Sudan is a far more recent conflict. When I say recent, it's not recent compared to Syria, and it's got a similar sort of history to Syria, right? But it is more recent, and it's not black and white in the same way, and it's not just a clear kafir government killing Muslims. It's people that claim Islam. Both sides are wrong. Both of these military sides that are fighting are wrong, and the Muslims are just caught in the middle and being genocided and being massacred and just being, like we said,
I mean, that's the point. I think we ought to consider. Is that it's the blood of Muslims that's being spilled, and that is a sacred thing that we should care about.
Subhanallah.
That this is a vital thing, and that if we're for me, this is the first time I'm hearing learning a lot of this stuff. I've been quite quiet, I think, this live stream, not least I'm a little tired, but
Yeah,
You know,
subhanallah.
that it's upon us to educate ourselves about this history and this conflict and the others that are going on in the world. We should
Absolutely,
be
subhanallah.
doing this. We should be aware of this.
Absolutely, subhanallah. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, like we said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That none of you believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, right? And these are our brothers and sisters being genocided right now. And also, like you're saying, Yani, this is just, let's not overcomplicate the situation. These are just human beings dying. Muslims, our brothers and sisters are being killed, right?
Yeah.
We overcomplicate it when we play these political games of, oh, the RSF and the SAF. And subhanAllah, I wanted to speak about the history, and I wanted to mention this so that people understand, Yani, they're not caught in the confusion of it, right? But absolutely what you're saying is, subhanAllah, that's the bottom line, is that there's just, these are our Muslim brothers and sisters being killed for no reason, subhanAllah. May Allah give them the victory. And subhanAllah, Yani, that, again, I mentioned this, was it, I think it was 2 streams ago, subhanAllah, is that it's, what's more painful to hear about than our brothers being killed is that our sisters being mistreated. And subhanAllah, when you have, you know, my auntie was telling me about a video, I think it was about 300, and this was like a year and a half ago, right? This is quite early on in the stages of the war there, is when you had, I think, a couple of hundred women mass suicide because they didn't want to be raped, right?
Yeah.
Subhanallah, yani, it's
you just
it's
see
so
that
cool.
it's as you said, it's banditry, that it's just not even just killing, but killing in a very degrading way, with no honor,
Subhanallah.
and then the mass rape, looting, you know, and just generally you know, harassing and abusing the people. I saw a frankly disgusting video. And maybe, you know, in the context of all of the death and the rape, you know, it becomes so much. But they had this old man, and they were yanking him around by the beard, these RSF fighters, and it just shows a complete, not even, no regard for civilian life, no regard for human life, no regard for Muslim life.
Subhanallah.
Just
Subhanallah.
the whole thing, really.
Wallahi.
This
Wallahi.
is disgusting.
Subhanallah. And so, and I just, as a finishing note on this topic, is that when it comes to Sudan, it's important to note that yes, this is obviously disgusting to see what's going on, but Zionists use this to draw attention away from what their genocide is doing, in a lot of ways worse than what's going on in Sudan, right? So subhanallah, yani, you'll see Zionists on the internet saying, oh, but how comes the attention isn't given to Sudan and Congo? Oh, it's because they hate Jews. That's just retarded, yani. I don't even want to break that down, but no, subhanallah, it's just not the case at all. May Allah's curse be upon these people. Wallahi,
We should be equally, you know, with all of wherever Muslims are being slaughtered or treated in this way, we should be concerned. We should treat it with seriousness and seek genuine Shari'i solutions. And the you know, this kind of, we shouldn't have this kind. I mean, this is silly, frankly.
yeah, wallahi.
Because
Wallahi,
other
wallahi.
people are doing it, you're now absolved of it. Like, come.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because it's a typical kind of colonizer mindset, right? And I say colonizer because this is this is the strategy used by the actual colonizers themselves, right? Is that what they would do is they would use kind of, let's say, not perfect behavior, right? Maybe wrong behavior done by the people they were persecuting as almost an excuse and a bara'a, yani a way of making themselves innocent. And it happened even at the time when the colonizers came into West Africa and they enslaved all these people, and obviously the disgusting conditions that they put them under. And then some of the colonizers will say, hey, but the African tribal men, they sold us the neighboring tribe. That doesn't make you innocent. Yani you were the chief funder of this, right? And so, yeah, I mean, subhanAllah, we have evil people fighting evil, doing evil things in Sudan. That doesn't make Zionists innocent in any way. right? That doesn't, and you know, subhanAllah, they will only draw attention to these things. And this is actually on the point of media coverage as well, but it doesn't. Sorry, James, you were saying?
No, no worries. Just my computer made a noise.
Oh, subhanAllah. Is that, subhanAllah, it's actually one of the reasons why we might see a lack of media coverage. Is the West, yani, they want to have good relations with the UAE, and so they don't, you know, obviously the West doesn't care about human life. It's just okay, the UAE, we're trying to be friends with them. Donald Trump is saying, hey, we have these big plans done with UAE in terms of finances and stuff like that. Just don't report on their genocide that's taking place. And also, okay, so why is Al Jazeera being quiet? Because Al Jazeera actually has a track record of speaking out, and they're not perfect, right? But they've been very, very good when it comes to Palestine. Why is Al Jazeera, you know, Al Jazeera obviously has reported on it. It's not to undermine what they've done, right? But why does it seem like everyone is more quiet on this? I've mentioned a bunch of reasons. It doesn't seem as black and white. Yani the obscurity of the war itself and the figures and all of these things. But maybe another reason is that obviously Qatar, Al Jazeera is run in Qatar, and it's funded by the Qatari government, and the Qatari government and the Emirati government aren't on good terms, but that doesn't mean that they can openly disrespect each other, right? And so they, you know, there has to be kind of, maybe they're playing a political game. Really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I actually suspect, right? I suspect that there's something hidden. I suspect that there's something about Sudan that's important, that's not being reported on, right? And there's a reason why a lot of news about this is being suppressed, right? I suspect it's something that we're going to see. Maybe it is just as basic as just greed, right? Maybe it's just the UAE just wants gold. SubhanAllah, it could be. Maybe Allah knows best, but you know, like I'm just saying, I suspect that there's something hidden going on, right? So SubhanAllah, that was Sudan. You know, make dua for all of your brothers and sisters that are being oppressed, right? And specifically specify Sudan in these times. Wallahi, and it is such a useless conflict. You're just, because like in Palestine, you see every single one of them that has died, right? They're fighting against the enemy. Here, SubhanAllah, it's just such pointless bloodshed, and just the innocent human beings, the innocent Muslim Sudanese, just being caught in the middle. That's not to say, obviously, that the Christian Sudanese are not innocent. It's just to talk about that region now. It's Muslim Sudani kind of thing, Sunni Sudani. So yeah, may Allah give them victory.
I'm going to have to leave you to talk about Mamdani on your own.
La barakallahu fi, James, inshallah.
Doesn't it? The time does fly, subhanAllah. The
time does fly, subhanAllah, yes. What's it called? Inshallah, for both of these topics, we're going to go into more detail, inshallah, in the future. Barakallahu fi, James. Inshallah, we'll speak to you soon.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, Mamdani, right? It's such a change of pace, right? It doesn't really feel right, subhanAllah. But okay, Mamdani. So Mamdani, those who don't know, Mamdani is an Indian Muslim, born and raised in Kenya, from my understanding, right? Comes to America when he's about 7 years old. And we followed him briefly. We mentioned that he ran for the mayoral, he ran as a mayoral candidate. He won the primary, which is was like the first stage of kind of voting in America for the New York mayoral candidate, and he won that. And it was an ominous sign for the, what's it called? It was an ominous sign for Cuomo, and it was an ominous sign for the pro-Zionists, because his popularity skyrocketed when he said that what's the first trip you're going to take after you become mayor? And everyone was saying, Israel. I want to visit the Holy Land again, my 5th trip to the Holy Land. And he says, I'm going to stay in New York and focus on New York, because that's, you know, what I was elected to do. And firstly, they called him an anti-Semite for that. You know, the mainstream media called him an anti-Semite for that. But amongst most people, he exploded in popularity, because it's like, okay, fine. New York, just like a lot of, you know, main cities in the world has become a very unlivable place. Rent prices are too high, food prices are too high, people are struggling to get by. So, subhanAllah, and it seems like the rich is really suffocating the poor there. And so Mamdani comes and he is saying that he's going to introduce all of these extreme policies. They're not extreme, but these policies to freeze rent and to basically make New York more livable, kind of thing, right? In that, you have the mega wealthy basically calling him a communist, right? And subhanallah, trying to defame him. Now, that's not like, I'm actually going to break down him as a person afterwards, inshallah, but just to talk about him in the political sphere only, and in the political sphere that he encapsulates, he's very left. He's very much a leftist, right? Socialist, has social ideals when it comes to, or have leftist ideals when it comes to morality, right? And so he has been outspoken when it comes to Palestine, and we have to give credit where credit is due. Outspoken when it comes to Palestine, that's actually where he got his popularity from, right? Is you have a bunch of New Yorkers that say, why focus on Israel? And also, the genocide that's taking place in Israel. Also, he said, if Netanyahu comes to New York, then we're going to arrest him. So, very, very heavy language here, right? And so he wins the primary for the New York mayoral candidate, and the New York mayoral race kind of thing. And now I think yesterday he actually was voted in as mayor. He won the race for the mayor of New York. And so what is the consequences of this, right? What it is, it's a big kind of, it's a huge blow to American Zionism. Why is that? It's because American Zionism for so long has dominated the discourse, right? For ages, Israel was a bipartisan issue, right? It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. Israel is a line you don't cross. We always support Israel, the left and the right, and you had both sides. Yani, it was actually funny when you saw what's his name, Donald Trump, and what was her name, right? The one under Biden, subhanallah, Kamala Harris, right? Both sides, when they were running to be president, to be president of the United States, both sides were speaking about how supportive they are of Israel. No, I love Israel more. No, I love Israel more. Subhanallah, and it's like obviously the people were becoming disillusioned to this at the time. But in terms of politics, this was a line that wasn't to be crossed, right? AIPAC, which is the American-Israeli, I forget what it stands for, subhanAllah, but basically it's the Israeli lobby in America. It's the financial backers of Israeli propaganda in American politics, right? And so what they'll do is they've explicitly said this, right? They will fund what's it called? They will fund, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, politicians that support Israeli policies and support Israel and bow allegiance to Israel, right? And they will, and this was reported on in Australia, is that if they've said this explicitly, that if anyone runs isn't explicit in their support of Israel, so they don't support Israel explicitly, that doesn't necessarily mean that they support Palestine, that they will make sure that they will have a very well-funded opposition, right, in that area. And so obviously the same is happening in America, right? And it's actually, there's been a big push in America, and there was a push at the time of JFK as well, or JFK himself pushed for it, for AIPAC to be labeled as a foreign lobby, which there's more stringent rulings put on foreign lobbies and the funding that can be taken by foreign lobbies, but it hasn't still been recognized as a foreign lobby, and therefore, right, politicians are capable of taking just stacks and stacks of money, millions, right? It doesn't cost too much in the grand scheme of things to buy a politician now. And if you think, Yani, you have only so many politicians in America. If you think, Yani, what, a million here, a million there, most of them don't take a million. Most of them is a couple of tens of thousands, 50,000 here, maybe on the more expensive side, 100,000. Yani, how easy it is to buy these politicians out, subhanallah. And so it's very easy for it seemed like we're having a bit of money for Israel to dominate the narrative in American politics. Okay, then what ends up happening is that Israel, after October 7th, its war crimes come to light. and everyone is seeing Israel for what it really is, right? And alhamdulillah, due to social media, right, one of the big pros of social media is that we were actually able to see the scenes coming out of the actual region, and obviously we've mentioned this in so many streams, and the unspeakable evil done at the hands of the Israelis against the Palestinian people. And so you're just natural, neutral-hearted American saw this and was just broken by it. It was like, okay, how comes that this is happening to a set of innocent people? Yeah, they look different to me, but I'm seeing their conflict and I recognize the humanity in it, right? I see their pain and I recognize the humanity in it. And so Mamdani has come, and for a while it seemed like, okay, how come people that were speaking out against Israel, people that were speaking out in a pro-Palestinian stance would get attention online, but we didn't know how that would translate to formal politics in the American sphere, right? And so Mamdani has been kind of the nail in the coffin for the rise of political Zionism amongst the American political class. Why? Because it's proven that now Zionism and to support Israel has become a political liability, right? Cuomo, the big argument against between Cuomo and Mamdani isn't there, what's it called? It's not their leftist, it's not his leftist policies, and it's not the fact that he wants to freeze rent, even though that's the biggest thing that's going to affect New Yorkers, and that might be one of the biggest reasons why New Yorkers themselves voted for him. But when it comes to the surface level argument, it's about Israel and Palestine, right? And about Cuomo being seen as an anti-Semite. And so, subhanAllah, the fact that he gets voted in, even though obviously he's not an anti-Semite, he is very fond of the Jewish community. He's done a lot in support of them. Right? And he regularly goes to visit them. He's attended a lot of bar mitzvahs and stuff like that. We're going to comment on this afterwards, inshallah. But that happening, right? And so him being voted in now, even though he has been pro-Palestine, shows that you can be taken seriously in politics while being pro-Palestine. And this is a big shift, right? Even in Britain, for example, all of our MPs until recently, right, it was only lip service for Palestine, but most of them won't vote for any sort of policy that goes against Israel. Now it's saying, okay, actually, we're the Palestinian stance and the pro-Palestinian stance, the anti-genocide stance, the anti-Israeli stance, or the anti-Israeli occupation stance, right? The anti-Netanyahu stance, which is a start, by the way. It's not to say that is the complete ideological package, but that's to say that's a step in the right direction, that this has actually become a liability and that you can be taken seriously in politics if you hold these views, the pro-Palestinian views. So that's why it's a big win. Now on Mamdani himself, right? Mamdani himself, like as Muslims, we have to be we're only loyal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger, right? His messenger, because his messenger is the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, subhanAllah, we shouldn't give loyalties to the West, just as we shouldn't give loyalties to the left, just as we shouldn't give loyalties to the right. Where the left serves our interest, we will support the left because they serve our interest. And where they don't serve our interest, we will condemn that part of the left, right? And where the right serve our interest, we will support that side of the right that serves our interest. And where the right doesn't serve our interest, we will condemn that part. We have to be confident and speak out loud, proudly, right, in our political stance. And so there was, and I mean, it's an innocent, one must say mistake, subhanAllah, it was an ijtihad done at the place of a lot of American Muslims, is they saw, okay, fine, the left seems to actually value me, they value my rights, they value me as an immigrant, and so there was an ideological attachment to the left, and they took it on as a whole package, right? So a lot of the times what you would see is Muslims from America, very soft, where Islam is harsh, right? Very soft on issues that the left is more, it's not only soft on, is in support of, right? When it comes to abortion, for example, Islam has a clear opinion on this, right? And actually, there is a difference of agreement, but none of them are the pro-abortion side that, or the what do they call it? pro-choice side that the left has on large adopted. Obviously, homosexuality, Islam has an unequivocal stance on this. That it's an abhorrent sin before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it's disgusting, and it's an intensified filthy zina, right? This is a stance that the left obviously is in support of, and so you'll see a lot of American Muslims, because they ideologically accepted the West, because the left, because they thought the left supported them. They said, okay, let's adopt the views of the left itself, and so they adopted these things, and that actually caused them to be in a worse position in the future. Why? Because they had to compromise on the parts of their Islam, right? That is part and parcel of the Islamic identity, right? The left doesn't have a problem with you as a race, right? They don't have a problem with so-and-so as a Desi, or so-and-so as an Arab, or so-and-so as an African, or so-and-so as, a Chinese person. But what they do have a problem is if you're not ideologically attached to their, their worldview, right? And so if you come out and you say, hey, I think this is a sin before God, right? The whole homosexual agenda, then you'll you'll obviously be condemned, and there was a whole cancel culture about this. And so why I say this is that Mamdani is leftist, right? He is Muslim by name. He's from a Shi'i Muslim family. That's not to say that that's not a blanket condemnation on the Shia, but he's not a religious Muslim, right? He is Muslim by name, and I would prefer to have someone in politics that supported Palestine and condemned Israel, right? Right now, than obviously someone that didn't, right? And so, if we view it, look, if he was a kafir, he would have been amazing, right? But the fact that he claims to be Muslim, we hold him to a higher standard, as we should. And so that's to say that we shouldn't fall head over heels for Mamdani, that he has stances that we would objectively disagree with, right? Those leftist stances that I just mentioned, right? And so that's important to mention. Don't fall in love with this guy, but let's use him for his good, right? Let's use him for his good. I don't think there's in Islam, subhanAllah, you use people for their good and you denounce their shar, you denounce their evil, right? And so we will use Mamdani where he is good. Inshallah, his pro-Palestine stance is highlighted, and inshallah, we see him arrest Netanyahu, even though I highly doubt that'll ever happen. And inshallah he's successful. The New York is the capitalist center of the world, right? And so there's a lot of let's say elitist capitalist policies that take place there, and it's driving out the working class of New York, which in a lot of ways are the bread and butter of New York itself. So it's become quite unlivable for New Yorkers there, and that was his main campaign before Palestine, right? And so that's that. But yeah, just interesting point. Why his victory is a victory for Palestine in American politics, right? But also why we shouldn't just fully accept this guy with open arms. It's not to say that he supports Palestine, he becomes our leader. No, we have a clear set of guidelines set out by the Quran and the Sunnah, and we follow those. And where someone aligns with those, we support him in his alignment to that. And where someone doesn't align with that, then we will not support him in that, subhanAllah. And so, for example, we share certain ethical, moral values, right? So morality pervades everything, but we share almost like when it comes to the conservative moral stances on, for example, homosexuality and abortion and family values and religion, you will find that Muslims will agree a lot more with the right wing. A lot more. That's not to say absolutely. Again, it's not a complete. Muslims aren't left or right, and we obviously, us and James discussed this in previous live streams. Is that we mentioned that it's wrong to think of Islam as being left wing or right wing. Islam is its own entity, and Islam is the truth, and these are fragmentary aspects of the truth. Subhanallah, that's important to note. But inshallah, we will go into both of these in more detail. Inshallah, we will have guests on when it comes to Palestine. We had a comment early on, and I did want to bring it up, subhanallah, is a brother saying, why not invite Sharif Abu Layth from Political Alchemy for discussion on the turmoil in Sudan and UAE's complicity. Inshallah, we will try and get guests on. And I haven't heard of this brother, but inshallah, I'll do some research on him, inshallah. But yeah, it's an important note. Don't forget your brothers and sisters in Sudan in your dua, right? If the least that you can do for them is make dua for them, and your brothers and sisters in Gaza and your brothers and sisters all over the world. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بارك الله فيكم, and we will see you next week inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.